Hello, everyone. So I know the volume isn't perfect, but I'll try and just keep my voice as consistent as possible and speak as loudly as possible whilst being natural. Um, I haven't made a video for a while because my grandmother recently passed away. My granny was 97 years old, and I've just been over to her funeral, so it's been quite an eventful week. I want to discuss the concept of national service. Apparently, Lord Tebbit, who is a senior figure within the Conservative Party, has said that he believes that national service should be brought back. Norman Tebbit is in his mid 80s now and so remembers the time in the before the 60s when it was obviously still around. I'm not sure what year we abolished national service in this country. I believe it was sometime in the late 1960s. Um, it's something that very occasionally you hear people, not just politicians, but also regular members of the public, say, "Oh, we should bring this back as a way of maybe this sense of a lost pride or a lost sense of civic responsibility." So here's my take on it. I'm going to say from the outset, I'm uneasy with the idea of national service being brought back. However, I am not totally against the principles of national service. So, why am I against the idea of it being brought back? Well, I've come across interviews with people who are now middle aged, sort of in their 60s, I guess. They've done national service, and in the cases that I've seen, it was not a case of, oh, it really taught me life discipline. It's more a case of, well, it took away a significant portion of my life, 1 or 2 years, at a time when I could have been really taking other opportunities. What I don't like about the argument around national service is it sort of taps into this good old days mentality, when the reality is the good old days were not always that good. So one of the myths around national service is that when there was national service, there was no crime, or at least far less crime. I would concede that there is a sort of yob culture that we have in this country today that perhaps wasn't around quite in the same way, but we've always had crime. There's always been violent crime. There's always been destructive crime. So I'm not convinced that simply having national service will reduce crime. In countries that do have national service, like Germany, they have crime statistics that are roughly similar to the UK, maybe a little bit better, but there is not a massive discrepancy there. Um, there's also the obvious pacifist argument around national service. On that issue, I don't think that would be such a big issue, and this is why. I think if national service were brought back today, it wouldn't be a case of forcing people to join the military. That's something that I would always be uneasy with. I'm not a pacifist myself, but I wouldn't be comfortable with a situation where people were forced to join the armed forces if their conscience told them not to. The world wars were obviously absolute total wars, so that's perhaps an exception. But I think that that's one of the main hesitations people have. It's immoral to force people to join the armed forces where they believe the principle or the job is to kill people. Of course, the armed services is not that simple. The armed services does a lot of humanitarian work, for example, in the relief of natural disasters, flood defences, providing aid to hurricane and earthquake victims, etc., and preventative national defence. And the idea of abolishing the military, if you take it to that extreme, is absurd. But actually, there is a pro military argument for being against national service, and that is that professional soldiers, I think one of the reasons we have one of the world's most professional armies, the British military is very well renowned around the world, which is why other militaries copy our training programs and why they invite British officers to train their troops, is because it is a professional army. The people who are in the military are there because they have chosen to join up. I think if we were to have a situation whereby people were conscripted, you would have a situation where people don't want to be there. And it's like any walk of life. If people don't want to be there, they're going to be less efficient than those who do. So you're going to have professional soldiers, people who've been in the armed forces for possibly years, being with people who really don't want to be there because they want to be following some other endeavor, whether it be whatever, acting or science or you name it. Um, so I can totally understand the concerns around that. Having said that, I don't think that contemporary national service would be purely military. I think there would be civilian options, such as working in a hospital or whatever. Um, I agree with the principles of national service, the sense of promoting civic responsibility, the sense, dare I say it, of promoting patriotism. Those are not bad things, and I think in some ways they are needed in this country. I do think sometimes we lack a sense of collective patriotism, sometimes. And there are certain things that other countries do that we don't do that maybe we should. I do think perhaps there's a sense of collective. The British are, we're almost embarrassed about being proud of things, and I don't think that's necessary. I think that's something that's changed in recent years. At a time when we would have been more proud, the empire's obviously gone, but it's kind of especially this left wing school of thought, like, blame the West first. And anyway, I don't want to get too far out on the socio or geopolitical issues, but those are areas whereby I think the principles of national service could be good. And certainly I can understand why people call for it when you see um, young thugs in particular being let off with a tap on the wrist after committing very destructive crimes. For me, the issue isn't national service, it's about, because in a sense, I feel that would be collective punishment of all young people. I think you can have national service and you're still going to get idiots and yobs who won't care. I mean, the Kray twins done national service, it didn't stop them from a life of crime. So I'm not convinced it would necessarily be a deterrent. Um, Perhaps a better approach is to instill the principles of it in the curriculum, and have organized programs where young people are brought to hospitals or brought maybe to field days out with the military, etc. Um, that way, they're having an observation of what that life is like without forcing them to do it for a significant period. If you're 21 or 22 and you're told for the next year you have to do this, that's incredibly disruptive. And I really think that that takes away personal liberty from choosing what opportunities you have. I think it takes away, it can break down relationships. It can prevent young people doing something that they would otherwise do. Take, for example, if a young person wanted to follow Olympic aspirations. Now, if they're told for a year you have to, do national service in a hospital or whatever, that's going to take away the time that they would otherwise be training for the Olympics. So it's taking away potential other opportunities. That's why I am uneasy about it. In a democracy, people should have as much opportunity as possible. I think national service, rather than providing opportunity, limits opportunity because it gives you a very narrow scope of. I mean, like I say, I think it would be different from the past, but I still am not entirely comfortable with the idea, and I'm also not comfortable with the mindset behind it. Oh, the good old days were better. They weren't always better, actually. Um, we do have problems today, but I just don't think that you're not going to have a situation where you send all young people to the army, then suddenly jobs are not going to be jobs. It might work with some people in a productive way. I do agree that the army can help stabilize people, but I just don't think it would necessarily. If someone resents it, they will resent it throughout the whole time. Um, Also, there are important differences in a country like Germany. They've obviously had far less active military operations, certainly in the combat role in the post World War II era. So comparing Germany with Britain isn't really. It's different contexts because they haven't had that same experience. So Germany's highly unlikely to be in a combat role in war. I'm not sure if Japan has national service or not, but likewise, since World War II, they've had a pacifist constitution. So there's fundamental differences. So summed up, I am not in favor of an organized, lengthy national service for all young people. I think the principles of national service should be used in selected temporary programs. but certainly not 1 or 2 years. That's a long, long time. When we're talking about young people, it's a long time that can really take out. And I'm not saying that there isn't good things about it. I can see that there are good things about national service, but that's just my gut instinct. I think it limits opportunity, and I think the arguments for it are a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction, frankly, like the good old days. Um, the truth is, we've always had crime and we've always had problems. So I'm not convinced that there is a direct correlation between national service ending and problems we have with job culture. I think there's a lot of other factors at play there. If you've done national service, obviously, if you're older than myself, let me know what you think. I've seen mixed things. I've seen some people saying that it was very good for their lives, that they felt it was a productive thing, but I have seen other people saying that it was just something, it took away time from their lives when they could have been doing something else. So let me know your thoughts. I'm for the principles, I'm not for an orchestrated, lengthy program of national service.